All right, so Matthew, it's interesting, people see an old man like me in a ministry and they go, oh yeah, you're old, you're dried up, you're has-been. Of course, it would make sense that, you would deny yourself or be celibate. But your story is really interesting, Matthew, in the fact that you're really young. How old are you?
21.
Okay, 21.
Yeah.
And when we met, you were 19, I think.
I think so, yeah, around that time.
Okay, all right. So to be 19 years old and to have this epiphany about God, but I want to unpack your story just a little bit first, if we can.
Okay.
So give us a little, idea of what your childhood was like.
All right. Well, I was raised I was raised on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is all the way on the coast. And, I was raised in a normal Adventist family and having loving parents, godly parents that just really cared for me. And, in the beginning, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I went to a Christian school for elementary school, and, I had normal friends, normal life. And until around the age of 9 years old, I'd say, is when I had a real shakeup of my life. It's when, an old friend of mine, well, someone I thought that was my friend, basically just sexually assaulted me, and it was another guy, and that really shook me up because. And it was repeated too. It wasn't just one time. He was giving threats against my family if I didn't do these things with him. And so, me loving my parents with everything in me, I wanted to protect them. And of course, now I know those were mostly empty threats. But back then, as a kid, I took them really seriously, and I wanted to, protect my family, protect my parents, and so these things kept happening over and over, and.
So Matthew, there was also something happening in your home as well. Your sister was really sick.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
From your perspective.
Right. So around the same age, my sister, she started having really severe back pain, and eventually got to the point where she was unable to walk. She was in a wheelchair. Doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. We later found out that it was a tumor on her spine. But during that time, it was just complete, chaos in the family. Us trying to figure out what's wrong with her, and being on the Outer Banks, pretty isolated. There were no hospitals, or specialists that could take care of her. So most of the time, either my mom or my dad or my sister was almost always gone, somewhere 4, maybe 5 hours away. And
you and your sister are close. I can see in the picture that they have, right?
Very close.
Okay.
We have a very close relationship.
So the situation is your sister's in the hospital, and your mom and dad, I'm sure, are, tending to them. How did you feel, being at home and, like you said, isolated and?
Yeah, it was really hard because at that age, I really craved that, love and affection from both my parents, and, my mom, mostly my mom not being around, it was really difficult because I would only see her maybe, I don't know, sometimes maybe a couple times a month maybe, I think. But it was just really difficult, and we were all under a lot of stress because of that, and whenever we were around each other, it would just be a stressful time. It wouldn't be calming and how family should be. Just
right. But these are extenuating circumstances. Of course, any parent would be stressed having a child in the hospital and then having to tend to their son at home.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't blame them whatsoever.
Absolutely, that's right. But from your perspective, you shared with me something just a few minutes ago that I thought was pertinent from your perspective as a child.
Yeah. So. Last night really reminded me of the term, the perception of rejection, which looking back, I know it wasn't rejection, but as a kid, parents not being around, being in a stressful environment, as a child, I perceived it as rejection, and it was just, I almost felt like I had to grow up on my own.
Right.
And it was just, that really took a toll on me, and
sure.
That kind of was the beginning stages of coming into depression and anxiety and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So So after the situation with this kid and then the physical circumstances of your sister being sick, when was it that you started to experience same-sex attraction?
I would say that was around the ages of around 12 to 13.
12 and 13.
Yeah.
All right. So what's happening for you back when I was your age, this was a taboo topic, but now for you, 12 and 13 years old was just a few years ago. So it was something that was being celebrated on the internet and you did come out. What was that like for your classmates?
At least back then, I hadn't heard of it too much, but yeah. So I was going to like a youth group at the time, and I started having these like feelings of same-sex attraction. People would talk about, in the youth group, they talk about all the people that they like and stuff, because young kids. And so, I started talking about my struggles with same-sex attraction like it was nothing, because everyone was talking about their attractions. And that really did not end well, because when I thought that people would be accepting and, loving as, because I thought it was like a Christian group, we're supposed to love each other. That's what I thought. But majority of the people there started bullying me, rejecting me. But there were a couple of people in there where there was the extreme opposite, where they loved me and affirmed me, and were just like, it's okay to be who you are, like, just, be who you want to be. And
so what I found really interesting is there's this division, and so the people that represented being more religious or spiritual, they rejected you.
Yeah.
And then the ones that were embracing you and telling you to do this were the ones that were loving and kind.
Yeah.
So again, what's the message that you were getting as a young person in church?
I was either, at least from that experience, I was either gathering that, I don't know, it was, I don't know, it was just not what I would imagine Jesus being. It was just either complete and utter rejection or love, but, ignoring all the biblical, things surrounding that topic, and just affirmation.
Yeah. Did that have an effect on your spiritual attitude?
I think it definitely did, because the people that were loving and affirming were the ones that were, seemed further away from the church and further away from God. And so in my mind, I was like, well, if these loving people are the ones that are kind of outside the church, then that's seemingly the direction I want to go.
Okay.
Because these people in the church that claim to follow God and love God are just pushing me away. And so why would I want to be part of something like that?
Okay. You made an announcement to your family, and one person in particular, will you explain that when you came out?
Around the same age you're talking about?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that was, I actually didn't come out to my, okay, so yeah, I did come out to my parents around that same time. And that was, it wasn't the best experience in the world, because I know this was all like new to all of us, really. And so, I was, they were still loving to me, but I was also, the response I got was not what I really wanted. I wanted complete like affirmation and stuff. And so from that point to my, family and almost everyone around me, I kind of backtracked a little bit and tried to hide that part of me, because I was scared, and I was scared of that rejection. So from that point forward, I kind of just brushed it under the rug, shoved it in the back of my mind, and just tried not to think about it as much as I could.
Okay. All right. So what was happening then?
So during that time, I was about to go to high school, actually, Fletcher Academy, and I'd lost so many of my friends, and so this was like an opportunity for me to start fresh again and leave everything behind in my past. And during those times, it was a lot of just, I knew that I was struggling with this same-sex attraction, but I just shoved it back, like, not important. And I wouldn't dare say anything in high school, because, I lived in the boys' dormitory there, and I just knew that would not go very well if they knew about my struggle.
So you were really struggling privately. Didn't have anyone that you could really share with.
Yeah, exactly. And so because of just shoving that back, and of course not really having a relationship with God, I experienced a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, which included like self-harm, and just, it was a really, really difficult time for me. And yeah, the first few years in high school were probably they were some of the most difficult years of my life. But then it eventually got to the point where around junior year of high school, I decided, I'm like, I'm going to give God another chance. And so this time, instead of the years of praying for God to take this away, it was almost like a demand. It wasn't really a prayer back then. It was more like, take this away from me. And
Well, could it also be a desperate plea?
yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Desperate
so
plea.
I think God understands that.
Yeah, and back then I was just pleading with God, but this time I had decided that I was going to surrender it to him. And I was like, God, I want your will to be done. Instead of me telling him what to do, I was going to let him do his will. And so from that moment, it was almost like during that prayer, it's like I felt God almost touch me. I felt this peace and this presence that just told me, give it to me.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, Lord, I'll give it to you. And from that day forward, I haven't struggled with depression or anxiety since.
Excellent.
And I've been completely free of that, and I just praise God for that every day. But I wish I could say that's where the story
ended.
But no, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows after that. But
you know what I appreciate, Matthew, and I think it's fair to say that I think that the walk as a Christian is a day-by-day experience. You know, it's not once saved, always saved. And the salvation that I experienced yesterday, again, I have to make the same decision each and every day. And I think that every Christian does. And I think that sometimes as Christians, we kind of give this kind of attitude that, well, once you're baptized, then everything's okay, everything's washed away, and you're fine and move on.
Exactly.
It does, yeah. So I think it's fair to say that there could be other times of struggle. And for you, it had a pull again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that started happening after I graduated high school and when I went into college. That's when I started having this deep fear about being alone for the rest of my life. Because for me, I always felt I was someone who couldn't, live the single life and stuff. That was just, companionship has always been really important to me.
That's a real thing.
Yeah. And, I just had this fear in me. I'm like, well, I'm still struggling with same-sex attraction, but I can't act on it. And of course, in college, I was even more surrounded by, affirming people. And at this point, I had told some of my friends about my struggle and, just to have someone to talk to about it. But then, that also turned into more affirmation of be who you want to be. And so around college is when I started to, I guess regress a little bit. And
so hang on a second, because you're really so young and there's so much life that you're living in these short years. Give me an idea of how old you are now when this was happening.
18, 19.
18 or 19,
Yeah.
So just a couple years ago.
Yeah, not that long ago at all.
All right.
And so I was, I just went right back into like, okay, this is who I am. But at the same time, I'm glad that I never gave up prayer during this time, because I didn't want to completely abandon my relationship with God, because I knew how much God had helped me. But at the same time, I had this weird idea that it was okay. People started telling me about like the whole like, well, the context of Scripture, the twisted bits of Scripture people try to bring up, and like, well, in context, it actually meant this. And I wanted to believe all those things. And so, I started believing them, and I was like, oh, okay, so it is biblically sound to live a homosexual lifestyle.
Right, like the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was the sin of inhospitality.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's why it was destroyed.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and so people were telling me all about that, and the devil's really good at making that stuff sound believable.
Okay.
And it worked. It worked on me. And then the consequence of that is, I started going on like some dates with some guys and stuff, and it just...
So to be clear, or just a little bit more to give, more understanding to those that are listening, Did the apps have any pull for you at all on your phone?
Yeah, I did. I
Okay.
had some of those dating apps and things.
Okay, all right.
But it was every time I'd go out with a guy or something, I would just be so unhappy because I've always been someone I want like a committed relationship. I'm not just here to be there for 2 days and then like leave or every week like some people do.
You didn't want a casual
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly. I wanted a serious relationship, and everyone I met never wanted that. And so, that was also distressing to me, and that led to, and then, throughout college, because of these people I was meeting, they were drinking and doing like marijuana and stuff, so I got into that stuff as well, and that led me down a dark path of just the feeling of being alone, never going to be able to find love, and the way I, cope with that on the weekends and stuff, I drink and do all this stuff I deeply regret, but
Right. Were your parents aware of this decision that you'd made?
not at all. No, I hadn't really informed them about any of this.
Uh-huh.
But prior to going to college, I did come out, I guess, again,
Okay.
to both my mom and my dad. So they knew about my struggle, but they didn't know about the decisions I was making, the depth of it.
Sure. Okay. All right. So now I know that I would see your parents at camp meeting, and in the Carolina camp meeting, we were invited to speak to the youth at times, and then we had programs there.
Right.
So I was aware of your parents. So what is now shifting in your life after that? You had an encounter with someone that really kind of woke you up.
Right. So during that time, this was around April of 2023.
Okay.
And I went on a date with a guy, and then he was saying afterwards, he was like, "Hey, I'm over by the college in Chattanooga, UTC," and he's like, "I have an apartment there, and I have some roommates and friends. We're just gonna have a game night. You want to come over?" And I was like, "Sure." And so, I came over, and then when I got there, I realized no one was there, and then at that time, he overtook me and sexually assaulted me, and that night was probably one of the lowest points I've ever hit in my entire life, and because I felt so powerless in that situation, and it really shook me up, and that it kept me like in bed just for multiple days, because I didn't want to get up in the morning, I didn't want to do anything, and I just felt hopeless. But going through Instagram one of those nights, one of my friends posted, I came across a post that said, "Nothing compares to the joy you have when you fully give everything to him." And for some reason, that post really just impacted me in a really, really special way. So for people who say social media doesn't work as ministry, it does. It definitely does.
It can be used for good or for
Oh
evil,
yeah,
right?
it can.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
So that had a profound impact on you?
very profound. And it
Was that the Holy Spirit, do you
Oh,
think?
definitely.
Just that simple phrase?
Definitely was the Holy Spirit that led me to that post, because, me being on Instagram at that specific time, I didn't use Instagram that much. And I just decided to go on it that night, and that was one of the first posts that showed up.
Okay.
And at that moment, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to make a change. And so at that moment, I got on my knees, and I cried out to God. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I was like, this time I genuinely want to make a change for you. I can't live this life anymore. I can't do this, and I need you to take over my life. So I invited God to take over my entire life.
What was the difference between that experience and the one before as a younger kid?
I think maybe I took just the easiness of life for granted back in high school. I hadn't had all these really difficult experiences, and I think, I know obviously God doesn't put these things on you, but he sometimes allows these traumatic experiences to happen to you, because I know that if I hadn't have gone through these things, I wouldn't know God in the way I do right now.
Right.
And it just really made me realize how much I need God and how terrible life is when you don't have God in your life. Yeah.
All right, so I want to fast forward just a little bit.
Okay.
I met you officially, what was it? It was a year and a half ago.
Yes.
At the Carolina camp meeting, and Ron Woolsey and I were there, and we were doing a presentation. And I remember your mother and father were so excited, they basically dragged you, and with a little short of kicking and screaming. And they're like, here, this is Mike Carducci. and I remember the look on your face. Can you tell them what was going through your mind? Because your parents were like super excited, and yet, where were you at? And I think it's fair to say.
So yeah, around that time is when like I said, it was a month after this whole experience happened, and I knew I needed to make
a month. Wow.
Yeah. So I knew I needed to make a change. I was at the very beginning of my journey out of this life, and I was trying to take things nice and slow. I didn't want to, I was just taking it slow with God.
Did you come to the meetings?
I wanted to come to the meetings, but I wanted to be in the meetings from afar.
I see. Okay, but you did come or no?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I did come to the meetings, but I was trying to, blend in with the crowd.
Right.
Yeah, but and then
your mom wasn't going to let you.
No, and I thank her for that. But but back then I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. But, that was kind of the look on your face when I met you.
Yep. But I definitely am very grateful that she.
Yeah, but you said something that was so sincere, because your mother's ready to celebrate, and yet you're just now like, taking your time and trying to come back in.
Exactly.
And this experience. Tell me how that felt at that time.
Yeah, so, I still wasn't sure on how exactly. I knew I needed to leave this life behind, but I wasn't sure on, the biblical understanding of all those things. And, just I needed to take things at a slow pace, and I was trying to just figure things out with God. And hearing Coming Together Ministries messages during camp meeting, I loved most of them at the time.
Yeah.
But there were a couple that, especially the ones that were touching on, God can change you, and hearing people's stories about how they came out of the.
Matthew, it's okay. It was Pastor Ron Woolsey,
Okay.
and he was talking about being married with children.
Yeah, I didn't want to name drop.
It's okay, but
Okay.
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you were upset by that.
Yeah, because I knew I needed to leave the life behind, but I was like, I wasn't so sure about the whole healing process, being healed from same-sex attraction. I was like, I don't know about that, and I was like, that just kind of made me angry.
Right. But God spoke to you.
He did.
And what was it that God said?
God allowed me to come to the conclusion of, who am I to put limits on a limitless God?
I hope you heard that, right?
Yeah.
So just the thought coming into his mind, like, who am I to put limits on God? That had to be him speaking, don't you think?
Definitely.
All right.
And then I felt kind of ashamed after that, because I was like, I was putting limits and just like, defining what God could do.
Sure. But that makes sense, because what you were hearing from the world is that can't change, shouldn't change, you're born that way, right?
Yeah.
And so then coming to Jesus Christ, it makes sense that would be a sincere thought in your mind.
Yeah, exactly.
And really, I think that's the beautiful part, that in this process of that healing, within just a few months, Daniel Varela was going to speak with us at Southern University in the human sexuality class, and he wasn't able to make it. And you and I had talked, and I invited you to share your story.
Yeah.
10 minutes ago, he didn't remember that he was actually there.
Yeah, I completely forgot that I spoke at Southern, but he graciously reminded me.
Yeah, and he gave his testimony to all of the students there. And what was your experience at that point? You were really moving along with God.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, I had given my future to God and was okay if I was going to be single for the rest of my life.
That was your understanding.
That was my understanding at the time. I was like, if I'm going to be single for the rest of my life, so be it. I have peace about that. Because I still wasn't at the point where, I even thought there would be a possibility of being healed from the struggle. And I remember when you were recording my testimony, you were, talking to me about how Jesus can heal you and bring healing, and I was kind of pushing back on you on that, and I was like, I don't know if that's a thing. And that really did stick in my head when you were, just that experience of you explaining that to me. And yeah, so.
All right, so we just have a few minutes left,
Okay.
and the best part is coming up now. So again, I'm packing my moving van to move here to Berrien Springs, and I get a phone call from you. And we haven't really connected a whole lot. You were involved in the unofficial group there at Southern to help individuals that struggle with same-sex attraction or are wanting to leave, right?
Exactly.
And you met Daniel Varela.
I did.
And the words that you said was, well, I'm like Daniel. I'm just going to be celibate for the rest of my life. So now tell them, if you would, what you told me on the phone.
Yeah, so if I can talk about the group just for like 30.
You have to hurry.
Okay,
Yeah.
but during that support group really is really what opened my mind to the idea of maybe having, a heterosexual relationship was possible. That really did open my mind to that, hearing especially Daniel's story about his now wife, and that really impacted me, like, whoa, like that is possible, especially getting to know someone that has experience. That was really, really helpful and powerful. And then just a couple of short months ago, I was back at the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and I met a girl at church, and we just started hanging out during the summer. She wanted swim lessons, so I was like, sure, I'll teach you how to swim.
Okay.
And so we started hanging out more and more, and then it got to the point where all of a sudden we were dating now.
Okay.
And I, soon after, I called you, and I told her, I have some exciting news, and I explained that story.
I thought you were going to say, I'm just coming to CTL4, and then you started sharing this feeling.
Yeah.
And do you remember when you were talking about having attractions for her, and I asked you, I said, how do you know that it's real? Like what convinced you to let you know that this is?
Yeah, I just said it just felt so right and so natural, and I had never had feelings like that before. And
is that amazing, folks? Just those simple words, natural,
Yeah.
right? And what was and right?
Natural and right.
Natural and right. That was so impressive.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, we're super excited. I'm sorry that we had to kind of rush to that point, but Matthew, just knowing you in the short time that I have, you're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure to anyone that's listening, to see a young person that is, figuring it all out, recognizing that this is a decision that you have to make each and every day. But look at how God is blessing you more and more and more as you give more and more to Him.
Exactly.
Wow.
And,
amazing.
yeah.
Is that an amazing testimony, folks? Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.